This is Launching Your Daughter podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here is today's episode. Episode 70. Welcome, everybody. I'm still having a hard time believing it. I'm actually on episode 70. It's been such a journey to do this podcast and share all these great guests that I've had on and various topics that I've discussed. And I just want to remind you that if you are needing some parenting support, or you're looking, moms, if you're looking for how to reconnect with yourself because you've lost part of yourself, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, what that means today in the episode, feel free to reach out to me at either launchingyourdaughter.com, or you can go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com, and all that information on how to get a hold of me will be there and we can set something up. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I found it so fascinating, and I love talking about myths and archetype and shadow work. So enjoy today. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. My guest today is Lisa Marciano, who is a licensed clinical social worker and a Jungian analyst. I'm really excited to talk to her today because we got some cool stuff to discuss. She has a private practice located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and she works with adults struggling with depression, anxiety, relationship issues, past traumas, and grief and loss. She also likes to work with myths, dreams, and fairy tales in her practice. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that today. So this is what I'm looking forward to. So welcome, Lisa.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I would love if you would share just a little bit with my audience about kind of what got you into this work, and tell us a little more about what does it mean to even be a Jungian analyst?
Sure. Well, that's a great question because lots of people don't even have any idea what that is.
Yeah.
But Carl Jung was a contemporary and a colleague of Freud's, and so he was writing, about 100 years ago, and he developed his own theories about the psyche, and many of the terms that you might be familiar with that Jung came up with are collective unconscious, introvert and extrovert, archetypes. Jung had a particular understanding of how psychological life works. He felt that we were all in a process of, I guess you could say, self-actualizing, kind of growing into the person that you came into the world to be. That was a big part of what he thought we were all here for. And so Jungians tend to see symptoms, when people come to see us, we tend to see symptoms as evidence that something is stuck in one's unfolding process, rather than that something's wrong or that the person is ill. So it's a real orientation towards health. And of course, Jung also had this idea that we're all connected through this storehouse of universal images that he called archetypes, and those show up in myths and fairy tales. And so we're always looking for the universal substrate of the individual's experience. And that's one of the reasons why I love fairy tales and bring it to this topic.
I love it. I'm smiling over here. I know we're not doing any video, but I'm so excited about this because I love the framework where we can get stuck in different stages of our life. Parent, not parent, the teen girls, it can all get stuck, but it's not about, you can't ever get out of this, that there's something truly wrong with you. Sometimes it's more of that reflecting back and looking at whether it's the kind of the shadow side, I guess, or whichever archetype may be coming up. So when we start to have more of that awareness, we can move through it and continue to grow.
Right. And another idea of Jung's that he was fairly unique in this, and I think it's an important perspective for moms actually, is that we never stop growing psychologically.
Yes.
It's not like, your personality's set by the time you're 5 and then that's it. No, that process of unfolding, and becoming whom we need to be continues throughout our whole lives.
Oh.
And what I got interested in when I became a mom, well, I was in Jungian training and I, had two little babies and I got really interested in how the experience of motherhood it's so incredibly challenging.
Uh-huh.
I remember I was out, one day just sort of like trudging uphill with a double stroller and it was freezing cold outside and I was only outside just because I couldn't stand to be inside anymore.
Yep.
And I just thought, oh my gosh, everything about this is so hard. Why didn't anyone tell me it was this hard? And I thought, okay, but what's really interesting is I think I'm really growing a lot as a person.
Yeah.
And that idea just really grabbed me. And I wanted to kind of read what other people had said about how the experience of being a mother changes the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has become, a major line of inquiry for me now for, going on about 13 years, actually.
Well, and
So,
I love that too. Just really normalizing that parenting in general. It is hard. It is a full-time job. You're on, especially when the kids are really young, you're on all the time because they're so dependent upon you. And as the kids get older, like they hit the tween and teen years, that dependency shifts and changes where they're not as dependent, but they still need you. They still, have questions and you're there to support and guide, but you don't have to do everything.
I think it's almost more difficult when they're teens, and and it certainly in terms of sort of what it kicks up in us as
Mm-hmm.
parents.
Yes.
It can kick up a lot of stuff to have a
Yeah.
baby or a toddler. Boy, it kicks up a lot of stuff to have a tween or a teen.
Yes. And what you were talking about too, as parents, you're going to get things reflected back from your kids. They may trigger various things that have been kind of put away or stuck in the back corner to not look at or reflect upon. And so it is an opportunity to kind of go up to those edges and grow and learn from what they're trying to
Yes.
also show you or mirror back to you. So I really love how, you really encouraging the moms out there who are listening of saying, hey, this is an opportunity that you continue to grow and change, that you're not stagnant and that it can be challenging at times.
Yes, and in fact, the sort of, kind of little paradigm little shift is it's not the fact that motherhood is really challenging and really difficult and a lot of times we're not sure we're doing it right and it's really
Mm-hmm.
painful. That's not only normal, that is part of what makes it such a growthful experience for the
Mm-hmm.
mom.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Well, I know you and I have talked a little bit in the past about it seems to be a fairly common thing for moms when they enter into motherhood, they begin to really lose a part of themselves or they put their self-care kind of on the back burner because they're like, oh, now it's all about my children and I'm really focusing on that. So from your own either personal experiences or what you've really done with other moms or what you've even gleaned from the research you've been doing with moms, what are some of these ways for moms to actually stay connected to themselves so they truly can continue to grow and role model to their daughter ways of staying connected and not losing themselves?
Right. Well, one of the areas I was interested in looking at specifically was creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, there's just no question that if you have any kind of creative life, and I mean that really broadly, not just people who are technically artists, but
Mm-hmm.
just people who have any sort of creative streak in them that, most of us, I would say all of us have a need to express ourselves creatively somehow. And, I think motherhood has a pretty complicated relationship with creativity in a mom. Certainly, it can really wreak havoc on one's creative life.
Mm-hmm.
I am aware of, writers, for example, who just simply say, that they wouldn't that they had to sacrifice so much to be a mom. They had to sacrifice so much of their creative life and their creative
Mm-hmm.
potential. And we can sort of look back through history even and imagine, you know, how much more art and music and literature might have been contributed to the world if mothers hadn't been the ones doing all of the childcare throughout the
Mm-hmm.
centuries. Sometimes I think about that. Certainly there are other factors there too, but
Right.
but but there's no question. that motherhood puts a damper on one's professional and creative life,
Mm-hmm.
right? That would be whitewashing it if we were to say that. At the same time, I am also aware that motherhood can be a way that some women reconnect with their creativity,
Mm.
or that in finding a way to stay connected with their creativity, it sort of sharpens it in a way.
Mm.
Um, I remember when I was in analytic training, there's this process where you have to take these series of oral exams, and it's very difficult. It's very challenging. Most people don't manage to get through the first time, and I did. I was able to pass all of those exams, and I remember reflecting on it. And my kids were very little when I did that, but when I thought back on it, I thought, oh, part of the reason that I did do as well as I did, I think, is because I felt like I had to study really smart.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go after it 110% so that I only needed to do it once.
Yeah.
And in some ways, having that additional challenge of having small children made me more focused.
Interesting. So it's like, hey, I've got to use this time wisely because I know I have other demands in my life. And so how am I going to do this differently? So really coming up with a process for you to be able to
Yes.
achieve that. Neat.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the novelist Barbara Kingsolver, she's got a great sense of humor, and she has this one essay where she talks about the rituals that some authors use
Mm-hmm.
to get ready to write, and these sort of like elaborate, long rituals, where they arrange flowers or go for speed walks for an hour or something, and she quotes Diane Ackerman as saying, "My muse is male, has the radiant silvery complexion of the moon, and never speaks to me directly." And then Barbara Kingsolver says, "My muse wears a baseball cap backward. The minute the minute my daughter is on the school bus, he saunters up behind me with a bat slung over his shoulder and says, oh so directly, 'Okay, author lady, you've got 6 hours till that bus rolls back up the drive. You can sit down and write now, or you can think about looking for a day job.'"
I love that. It's like, no, I've got a time crunch and I'm going to
Right.
utilize it. Whether
Yep.
I'm feeling creative or not, I'm going to sit there and make it start to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. So really, what I'm hearing too is for all our moms that are listening to this, it's like there's not going to be this beautiful ideal situation. It really is kind of shifting that mindset of, hey, if I have 15 minutes that I can write, I can arrange flowers, I can do some sort of knitting or crafting project that I want to do, that you don't have to say, oh, I've got to get it completed within this time frame, but it's that work in progress. But that's also filling their soul. It's also keeping
Yes.
that part of themselves alive and connected and not losing
Yes.
that. Oh, I love
And,
that.
letting go of the need for it to be perfect.
Yes.
And someone said to me once early in my process of sort of trying to do analytic training while also having two small kids, she said, "Well, it's the art of the possible," and I held on
Oh,
to that, because I
that's beautiful.
I couldn't do it perfectly. I couldn't immerse myself deeply into the process. No, it was sort of like Barbara Kingsolver was saying. It's like, oh, I got an hour. I better get cracking and see what I can
Yeah.
do. But that's a rich process in and of itself, I think is what I want to say. I also want to talk a little bit, if I may, about this idea that if we've been split off from our creativity,
Yes.
sometimes being a mother is what rekindles the connection.
Okay.
So because I'm a Jungian, I love archetypal material, and so I want to talk about this in terms of a fairy tale. And the fairy tale that comes to mind for me for this is a well-known one. It's one of my favorites. It's Rumpelstiltskin.
Mm.
And if you remember, the miller's daughter gets into her predicament because her father is boasting about her. In some versions of the story, she hasn't really. She hasn't really distinguished herself in any way, but the miller, we can sort of think about him as if he's a narcissistic parent.
Mm-hmm.
He wants his children he wants his child, his daughter, to reflect well on him. So he says to the king, he's like, well, my daughter can spin straw into gold. And that obviously puts her in a bad situation because the king says, well, that's great, have her come by.
Mm-hmm.
So I think most of us know this story, and you'll recall that she goes to the palace and is locked in a room filled with straw and told that if she can't spit it into gold, she will be killed. And of course, she starts to cry, and in comes the little man, the imp, who agrees to do it for her in exchange for her jewelry. And eventually she's given away all of her jewelry, and he says, okay, I'll do it for you, but you have to give me your firstborn child. So to me, this is an image of split off creativity, which indeed is what happens, especially I think to women, when we've been wounded, in particular by a father who may be narcissistic, and it comes to mind to me the father for whom we were never good enough, academically or in terms of creative accomplishments, or maybe he did like what we did. He did appreciate our accomplishments, but he sort of took them for himself. I worked with one woman who was very smart and accomplished, high school student, and her recollection was that her father made her apply for a scholarship that his company ran, and she won it, and then he declined it.
Oh,
and
wow.
what she realized was it was all about him being seen by his coworkers, because he was seen as the father of the daughter who won the scholarship. And then he got to say, oh, and we magnanimously decline it so that someone else can benefit from it. Wow. So it was sort of all for show. And it was, he was sort of using her, if you can see that, in a narcissistic way. Right. So this was a woman who had some difficulty getting in touch with her creativity as an adult, because it felt like her talents and her skills had been sort of taken from her, by this dad who sort of needed her abilities to reflect well on him.
And that's what you're really referring to when you say the split. It's she lost that part of herself. It's still within her, but she let that kind of go to the background because of that moment, and how it's like, hey, sorry, can't have that, even though she did it. Yeah.
Yes. So in the story, then, we can see the little imp, Rumpelstiltskin. We can see him as the miller's daughter's split off creativity. If you think about it, she manages to do the task, right? She does it with his help, but we can see him as an aspect of her that feels a little demonic. It feels like it's not something she has a conscious relationship with. And of course, for some of us, creativity can feel demonic. It feels like it whips us around and makes us unhappy, and takes us over at times, and really isn't within our conscious control. And that obviously can be a painful experience. The lovely thing about the story is that the miller's daughter is able to resolve this conflict when she's able to figure out this relationship with Rumpelstiltskin once her child is at risk. When he comes back, he says, you said you'd give me your firstborn child, and she does not want to give up that baby. So she's able to do what she needs to do to figure this out. And then he goes away and isn't a problem anymore. And I understand that, him going away as, okay, now he's become reintegrated.
Yeah. Yeah. She saw that part of herself and got them in alignment again, or acknowledged that part of herself again. It was like what we were talking about, that split. Yeah. Becomes the whole. Yes.
So I have a little biographical story about this that I think kind of maps onto the fairy tale, and it involves the author JK Rowling.
Yes.
Harry Potter author. She had a difficult relationship with her father. She has described him as frightening, and apparently, at least the last thing I'm aware of, she has written that she hasn't had contact with him in over 10 years. And she was actually a bit of an underachiever. She wasn't a particularly great student, and apparently she worked as a secretary, I think, after she graduated from college. When she was a young woman, she moved to Portugal and was teaching English, and that's when she started writing what later became Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But she got married to a man down there who became the father of her child. And she has described the marriage as catastrophic. I think sort of intimations there may have been some abuse there. They split just a few months after Rowling's daughter was born. And so there she was. She was in England. She returned to England. She had this baby. She was depressed. She was poor. She felt suicidal. But she just kept on writing, working on the novel when her daughter fell asleep. So again, sort of the art of the possible. The baby would fall asleep in the pram, and she'd pull out her notebook. And, obviously that determination to protect both her actual offspring, her daughter, and her determination to protect her creative offspring by keeping on working on it against all odds. We know what happened. The rest is history, as it were.
Yeah. And I didn't know all that about her. And it's amazing that when you have that determination, really every little small step that you take, you gain confidence and you gain momentum by doing that. That's why we've talked quite a bit with, trying to support parents and the teen girls when it comes to study habits. It's like, if you keep putting it off, then it increases the anxiety and stress levels. And so when you actually, are just like, okay, this is what I need to do for me to feel less stressed out about these things, you just set aside that time. It's that time management. It's that focus, like you're talking about, that the more you do it, that you will keep that going and not lose that part of yourself in doing it. Yeah.
I think many women of my generation, I'm in my 50s, I think, I mean, certainly many women that I know had the experience of having a mother whose story was, I used to be really good at X, or I used to Y, and then I had children.
Yeah. And lost it.
And I think that is a really tragic inheritance, because then you wind up feeling, you come to adulthood and you think, well, I guess I can either, follow my passion or my dream, or I can have kids. And I think I know a lot of women who've had to struggle with that. And I don't, of course, it's not true that, oh, you can have everything. And it's, just, that's not true either. And yet I think that there is a way to both at least for many, let's say, to both nurture your child and enjoy being a mother, and nurture your own creative offspring also.
Yes, and I like that, again, that story that has been kind of handed down sometimes through generational things. That's the either or versus both and. And
that's an important thing to model for our daughters.
Correct. And it's when it's the both and, what you've also were alluding to, it's like, it may not look like, oh, let's say you've spent, hours doing the writing or whatever that creative thing that you like to do. It now may be modified to shorter amount of incremental time slots, because that's just where life is at the moment, and that you've hit it that you can't do everything. We're just it's not physically possible for us to do everything in a day. So it's really looking at where's the priorities and how can I create some of those time slots, which again really feeds your soul. And that's that self-care piece of it that you as the parent, the mom, can really help role model that then for your daughter who's coming up in the world, because she's going to have very similar challenges. It's just every generation it's going to look a little different with, to me, the technology that really gets into that and how it can be very distracting. So being able to role model, hey, disconnect from the electronics, disconnect from, all the media, and be able to go within to do whatever that creative project is that you want to work on, or that creative outlet that feeds you, versus looking outside yourself to try and be fulfilled and fed.
Yeah. Like for anyone that has a creative process of any kind, whether it's, knitting or scrapbooking or whatever, it doesn't have to be sort of formal art. You have to take a stand for it, like the Miller's Daughter did, or like JK Rowling did, and say, this really matters. And like you're saying, I'm not going to get lost in my Facebook feed, at least not all the time. Sometimes I'm just going to really stick to it and focus on this thing that really matters to me and nurture it in spite of the other things going on in my life.
Right. And what we've talked about earlier too, it's not about perfection. I mean, I have so many of my previous podcast episodes, we talked a lot about embracing the imperfections, not just as parents, but just as humans in general. And this is part of this when you're, parenthood, there is no perfection. It's not even, to think that it's attainable is a myth right there. And it's like some things are going to come across really balanced at certain points in the times, and other times you're like, wow, this is all out of whack. And so it's, again, zooming back out and really looking at it's like, okay, what can I shift or change so that it feels like there's a little more equilibrium that's going on. And to me, we can't stress this enough about moms and women in general truly staying connected to themselves and not losing that part. Because when that disconnection happens, when that split off happens, that's where anxiety can come in, the depression can come in, because it's that stuckness of, oh my gosh, I'm not enough and I've got to do more. But you've lost that inner knowing that is so important to continue to feed.
And I think it's easy to do, right? Because your kids are always going to need more.
Right.
And if you have any hesitance about investing in your own process, whatever that is for you, your kids make it really easy for you not to do that.
Yes. Yep.
I worked with one woman who had always wanted to be a playwright, and she had sort of unfinished drafts of plays in her drawer. And the truth is that, I think she was just sort of scared to move forward with it, She talked about going to a playwright kind of workshop, and she was all set to take her plays there, and there would have been people who would give her feedback or help her make connections. And in the end, she decided not to because, she said, well, how can I leave for a week? My kids need me. And, we discussed how that was a kind of a convenient excuse not to attend to herself.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good example of the children become that convenient excuse, because it's scary to step into that place of vulnerability. And at the same time, that's also part of your growth. And you're role modeling to your kiddos that it's okay to feel nervous about things and take the step anyways. Because that's how you gain confidence. That's how you really do overcome anxiety. It's there for a reason, but it doesn't have to take control of your life. The more we back away from it, the bigger anxiety can get. So,
that's very well put. And I think if you and of course, we've all done this to one extent or another. If we let our kids become our excuse for not pursuing the things that matter to us, wow, that is a huge burden to put on your kids.
Yeah. Yes. Very true. Very true. And then, again, what we just talked about a few minutes ago, that story then gets passed along to them. That it's like, oh, hey, if you're going to have kids, you got to make sure all of their needs get met and yours don't, which just keeps that generational story going instead of it being broken.
Right.
Well, Lisa, I know you and I could talk more and more about this because I love talking about the archetypes and then the myths and the fairy tales and how all of this is so connected to our lives. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with our parent listeners and the caregivers out there that have these teens and tween girls in their lives and how they can really start to reconnect with themselves and look at some of those triggers and saying it's okay for me to invest in myself and, like you said, in whatever area that may be, because that's going to help their relationship with that girl in their life and show her that it's okay to follow those dreams and passions. It's not an either or, it's a both and it's being able to kind of compromise and maybe modify what that looks like too.
Absolutely. Not an easy thing to do, but a
It's
worthwhile
not.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious, do you have a book or any tips for the parents that are listening out here that really help them, I guess, continue to encourage and support their daughter and staying that confident, place that they are, or feeling a little more empowered?
I don't have sort of a favorite book on this topic. I am in the process of creating a website. It's called motherhoodtransformation.com. And what I want to offer on that website is a lot of free material that's similar to what I shared here today, more just exploring themes and also creating a community where moms can share similar ideas with each other.
Oh, I love that. So again, supporting the moms that when, again, they feel supported and have a place to kind of discuss things, that also supports that relationship with their girls and they can pass that information along to them. I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, what is a good way, if our listeners would like to get a hold of you, what is a good way for them to get a hold of you? You said your website's, this new website's getting up and running. Is there another place that they could get a hold of you?
Yes, I blog at theyoungsoul.com, and my professional website is lisamarciano.com.
Excellent. Well, I'll have all that in the show notes for those of you who are driving or at the gym, working out, wherever you may be. This will be in the show notes and you can get that information later. So Lisa, again, thank you so much for taking the time for being on the show and just sharing, again, this is just like the tidbits of the depth of information that you have on parenting and for motherhood, and look forward to that new website coming up and what all that's going to be in there and the connection, the community that you're creating. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Just a reminder, if you need any parenting support or coaching for yourself to reintegrate the part that has been split off, or you're really trying to find what your life purpose is, feel free to reach out to me at NicoleBurgessCoaching.com. Thank you for listening to Launching Your Daughter with Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist. For more information or to stay up to date, go to launchingyourdaughter.com. You can sign up for my email list or join my Facebook group. Thank you.